Habeas corpus charges against said Josiah Brown under the constitutional amendments is selling old cider and being found drunk under the village bandstand. I'll give you a gallon of old cider and a dozen fresh eggs, Judge, if that'll square it. You're too late, Mr. Brown, but just 15 minutes. All you witnesses stand up. The testimony you give in this case must be the truth, warranted, not to rip, revel, tear, or run down at the heel.
Judge, I wish you'd let me testify. I want to go home. I'm afraid my soft soap is boiling over.
Judge, I object to my wife's testimony. She ain't nothing but a common, ordinary lunatic, and I can prove it by thunder and lightning. How can you prove it, Mr. Brown? Why, she gave me fried tripe with molasses on it for my breakfast this morning. Go ahead, Mrs. Brown.
I know a certain man in hard trouble that has been selling old cider. I won't mention his name, but his initials are Josiah Brown.
You must confine yourself to direct evidence, Mrs. Brown.
You see, Judge, I've been having the grip, and I told Dr. Hyde that I felt a good deal worse than I looked. And my husband, Josiah Brown, said I wouldn't live over 12 minutes.
Mrs. Brown, are you sure you're telling the truth?
Oh, yes, she is, Judge. I can always tell.
How can you tell, Mr. Ricker?
Because it always makes her sweat.
And is that all, Mrs. Brown?
No, Judge. I told Josiah Brown right then and there that he had to choose between me and old cider.
Well, Mr. Brown, what do you say to that?
Gee, Horsefat, give me old cider every time.
Mrs. Brown, you'd better go and tend to your soft soap. Mr. Ricker, take the stand. Did you work for Mr. Brown?
I did, but I wouldn't work for him again if I was starving to death.
And did you see him sell cider?
I did, and it was half water.
What was his price?
10 cents a gallon on weekdays and 40 cents on Sundays.
Mr. Brown, you are guilty. And I fine you $2. And someday you might bring me up a dozen fresh eggs if you think of it.
Oh, I'll think of it all right. And you'll get them eggs one at a time when you're all dressed up for church. And there won't be fresh ones another.
Court's adjourned until some darn cuss starts selling old cider again. Clear the court.
There's a red light on the track for Boozer Brown, Boozer Brown. There's a red light on the track for Boozer Brown, Boozer Brown. There's a red light on the track, it'll be there when we get there. There's a red light on the track for Boozer Brown, Boozer Brown. There's a red light on the track for Boozer Brown.
I reckon I know how to deal out justice to these here darn cider fellas. I'll settle 'em, oh, I'll settle 'em.